it was evident and very clear that individuals really weren't motivated by that $1,500. They weren't motivated where they were going to proactively go, oh, there's a job for X, Y, and Z. Half the time in communications, an issue too. Do you think your employees are going on your website and looking at, openings and then, going out to their friends to try and proactively recruit somebody? No, it's luck. And that's all it boils down to. So we knew that we had to generate and create, a system, a platform that was very, very passive, that, got you to populate your network that was yours. Nobody else could tap into it but you.
Welcome to WorkNow's Humans of Staffing podcast. My name is Sammy Singh, along with my host, TJ Sammy.
Hi, my name is TJ Sammy, the co-founder of WorkNow.
WorkNow is a leading provider of software for the staffing industry.
Being in the industry for the last 30 years,
not only have we run staffing agencies, but we've been in software in the staffing business for the past 20 to 25 years.
Our focus is, in addition to other aspects of the staffing industry, will be on how emerging technology is impacting the staffing industry.
What we want to learn from this podcast, if you're interested, is how do recruiters do their jobs? What can they do that you can learn from?
How our guests are overcoming those challenges and the opportunities they'll see in the future.
The owners, what challenges do they face? As well as the temps that work in this business and what do they need for this industry to thrive. So the goal of this podcast is learn and understand where it's going, where it's been, and hopefully you get some value out of this podcast. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Humans of Staffing, another episode. Today we have with us Brad Beach, founder and CEO of Tailored Management and Jobvious. Brad, thanks for chatting with us. This is it's been a pleasure. I know we've not physically met before, but we've spent about 15 minutes together, and your story was really, really not only inspiring, but a ton to learn. So tell us a little bit more about what you do at Tailored, and then how you built it into a $100 million global staffing firm, which everybody in the staffing industry aspires to do.
Oh, yeah. So Tailored Management started with just me after I left the large, staffing area. I knew I wanted to do something on my own. And we started, like I said, with just myself. And then gradually as we grew, I added people. And we were offering your standard, contingent labor services to clients within the Columbus, Ohio area. I knew that to grow, in that day and age, at least, I knew to grow, I had to have multiple brick and mortar offices where we wanted to service. At least that was the model back then. And then one day, one of our clients came to us and asked us from Columbus, Ohio, hey, is there any chance you guys can help us in Albuquerque, New Mexico? We have some needs down there. And I said, sure. Hung up the phone, and then we panicked and figured out how in the hell are we going to do this? We have no idea. So we figured it out. And we had great success, which, gave me an idea. Why don't we do this for everybody? And back then it was a novel concept. Everybody that staffed in a geographic location at that time had a brick and mortar office. So we were bucking the trend. So we rebranded Tailored Management with a central recruiting hub. And the benefits of that being that we had all the stakeholders in one location, all of the client services, all of the recruiting, all of the leadership. So we were a cohesive team. It lowered compliance errors across the board. And we had some pushback. Some clients were like, there's no way, how are you going to staff us in New York City or New Jersey from Columbus, Ohio? I don't even know where Columbus, Ohio is. But they ended up giving us a chance. And that client, which was MetLife, became one of our largest advocates. And at that time, when we went around and talked about it, it was a new concept. Everybody thought it was great. And now it's commonplace, right? Now everybody has national recruiting centers. But that was our leg up. And that was our pivotal moment, honestly, from becoming a smaller local staffing provider to a global staffing company. And we learned an enormous amount. I feel great about forging the way. We got a great reputation as a result of that. and a good name. And that's helped us continue growth and continue expansion and have good conversations. And our staffing model is to provide contingent labor, typically in the Fortune 1000, where there is oftentimes an MSP in place and generally a VMS tool. So we get the recs, submit, and compete with everybody else in the program. And hopefully we win more than the average.
Thank you for that. So I'll take one step back. I see you've got a bachelor's degree in economics.
Yes.
So what made you get into the staffing industry?
So my first job out of college actually was working for an Archer Daniels Midland, right? Where I was buying futures on the Chicago Board of Trade for agricultural commodities. And I determined pretty quick that I don't think this is where I want to spend the rest of my life. And I was in Cincinnati at the time. So I started looking for a job in the newspaper and replied to a posting for what was called a staffing manager at Robert Half International. And it appealed to me because it was sales, relationship building, and HR. And so it felt like I was going to learn multiple disciplines in one job, which would make me very marketable. Got into it, had a lot of success, really enjoyed it, and stayed there for 6 years until I realized that I struggled with the large corporate culture, not focused on being inclusive, but more focused on being exclusive, where, directives were passed down the chain without a lot of explanation. So it was hard to get bought in to a lot of the initiatives. And so I thought, I can do this on my own. I was young, a little ignorant. I thought, why not? And so I left and started what we have today. And so, I do love the staffing industry. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, but I do love it. It's really all I know. But the people are great. There's a lot of great people. And it taught me an enormous amount about empathy for people, about understanding, about listening, about coaching. And so I'm grateful for that. It's helped me in every aspect of my life.
Great. So on my side, the next question is really, Brad, all of us remember being at a job and then deciding that I'm going to go open my own thing. It's exciting, scary, all the above. And majority of the folks tell you you're making such good money at where you're at. Why in the world would you go out and risk everything you got? And yet it's not the money, the motivation. It's something that clicks at that point that tells you that's the pivotal point, right? Where you said, done, I'm going to take this road up this hill now, because that's where I'm going to be.
At the time, looking back at the time, I don't think anything necessarily clicked. I think that when you're young, you feel a little invincible. And if you fail, in my mind, I can easily get a job somewhere. It wouldn't be ideal, but I knew that it wouldn't be the end of my world. It wouldn't be the end of my career. And a little bit of ignorance. I didn't think about failing. I just focused on charging forward. And there were tough times. Obviously, I'm sure for all of us, there were tough times. And during those tough times, I just kept telling myself, you are a good person. You do good work. You have good values. Keep doing what you're doing. Something good will happen. And eventually good things started to happen. And that was the time that I started doing a little bit of self-reflection, like, why me? Why am I having success? And I attribute it to investing in relationships and what we now here call paying it forward, right? Where you do the right thing all the time, even if there is no reciprocation, even if there is no dollar figure that you are expecting in return. If you invest now, eventually those things come back to you. And that's kind of our whole philosophy, that we don't hammer clients to try and get business. We give them the benefits of our business and what we're all about. And sometimes that's enough and sometimes it isn't. But more times than not, they end up coming back to us because we're very authentic and genuine. And they know that when we talk about paying it forward, we realize like timing might not be right today, and that's fine, but eventually it will be. And when it is, let us know.
Another thing in this, so you've got a day-to-day role today. Even Brad, do you play a day-to-day role in the business, or do you now have, as you talk about this culture, we'll talk about not only the culture that you say, which is, it's okay to fail. Let's go and try. Give us a little bit more about that, because that will be a good foray into how you created that management team.
I do play a role in the business still. I'm at the office right now. I'm not actively in the weeds with the business. My primary role is to coach, give insight, motivate, inspire, and reiterate and speak about the principles that we value in our business. And because people forget sometimes and they need to be reminded. So I take a lot of pride and I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. When you're doing that, you see the eyes in the person lighting up and it feels good. And then they walk out of here and you know that they've just been recharged. I love doing that. Our culture is a free to fail culture, not deliberately free to fail, right? But we want individuals. I believe in autonomy. I believe that if you don't offer individuals autonomy in the way that they do their work, you're stifling creativity and you're potentially and likely missing out on innovation. And so we talk about autonomy because I want individuals to do things not as they are told, but to do as they're told, but also question that and offer better ways of doing it. And to me, I think that individuals that want fulfillment out of their work, which I think is the majority of people, that is how you find fulfillment. By being able to quantify, visualize the impact you're having on the work and the pride that you take in offering a better way of doing something, processing payroll or sourcing candidates or whatever it might be. And people thrive in that environment. It's a little bit, unusual because there is risk, but I think the risk is very far exceeds the risk. It diminished, proper word. The benefits outweigh the risks, exponentially because you get innovative ideas that people are thrilled to offer up, and you get greater efficiency, and your people are happy and they're energetic coming in the day, in the morning. And so that is what we're all about. I'm more of a servant leader. I don't really focus on hierarchy. I don't think that I am any better than anybody else in the organization or any more valuable. I think that, we are a unit all marching in the same direction. And these are some of the things that I just believe in. Anybody in this office can open my door and come in here and criticize me. And, I welcome that, because if they're doing that, then they feel that they're entitled to answers, which means they're very, very invested in the business.
Did the culture or the growth of the organization change or evolve, or how do you keep it from when you're a $20 million company, 50 million, 100? Did you see that evolving, even though the core values kind of remain the same, right? I mean, but as far as communicating that to your leadership and then leadership further, communicating to your middle management and so forth, did you experience that evolution?
We did. It was challenging. And, I was told, that this could happen, and it did. And it was frustrating. And I couldn't tell you exactly how it formulated. It just snuck up on us. And then there was kind of a little bit of an air of entitlement, a little bit of, not taking accountability or responsibility and pointing fingers. And so we circled the wagons and we reinforced what we're all about, what we believe in. We're all in this together. Instead of pointing the finger at somebody, why don't you sit down and talk to people about why this is going on, how you can help? Because it isn't them against you, it's all of us. And if they don't succeed, you don't succeed. And just reiterating that stuff over and over again, and also educating people. Because a lot of times people point fingers or don't take accountability or fail to do something because they don't understand the value, right? They aren't sure. They make assumptions that someone isn't doing their job because one of my candidates called me and they didn't get a response from payroll in 30 minutes. And it's about asking questions, being curious, and operating under assumptions of positive intent. Nobody walks in the door here, and I'm sure in most places, with the intention of failing or screwing up your world. So just keep that as your base level thought, and things are going to be much more unified. Understand again that having a deliberate conversation with the intent of helping one another instead of blaming one another. And so that has helped enormously. And we got some of the bad individuals out. That it only takes a couple to poison an entire group. And we learned we need to do it quicker. I have a fault where I think all people are good, and I try to see the positives, and I realize that is great, but it can bite you in the backside.
More often than less sometimes. But
Yeah.
that's a great philosophy. Now, three things that you look at every day to know the pulse of your business. Is there a routine that you follow that every day where you go, if I know these three things, even if I'm on an island, I'm good? Or could be five, but the least amount that you look at to know you're in good shape.
I meet with all of the executives every week, one-on-one. I get overviews of what's going on in their world. And they know that when they are communicating with me, I want to look at certain things, such as, what is our coverage? What is our sub to interview? What is our interview requested to complete? What in client services, what actions and activities are you doing to increase our footprint? Concrete, quantifiable types of things that are going to move us forward. I don't like the small talk. I like to, because I have a ADD. And so people know, come in, get right to the point, talk about the things that matter. And then if Brad has some spare energy left upstairs, then we can hopefully have some small talk conversation. But when I hear those metrics and we have those conversations, I offer guidance. I offer ideas that I think could benefit or help. If there's something falling short, I will offer up, different strategies, and then we will do a touch base again and find out how those strategies are working. But primarily, that is the extent of what I do on the tailored management side. On the Jobvious side, it's very different. I spend a lot of time on Jobvious, talking, meeting with clients, doing demos, and working with the development team. And we have a daily meeting with development and with our crew over there that manages to enhance and continue to add features and so on and so forth.
So I know AI is the buzzword, right? Everybody's talking about it. And AI means different things to different people, right? In your mind, when you look at AI, how do you see it impacting your current organization? And if it is maybe more specific on different areas within the company that you feel AI would have the maximum impact? Is it accounting? Is it sales and marketing? Is it operations? Is it which aspect of AI, number one, are you currently using? Where do you think the number one impact is within the organization?
Yeah, right now we, have an AI algorithm in Jobvious for matching that continuously learns. We are utilizing another third-party company that does AI screening and assessment for individuals that apply, and then it, transcribes a write-up. I think that those are potentially great tools. I don't think we're in it long enough yet to determine where it's best suited. I do not think that AI will ever fully replace the human component for various reasons. I don't think AI is capable of that, of reason, of understanding the nuances of a specific client versus the qualifications match. And I think that clients would be very, very apprehensive if you told them all of the people we're sending you now are going to be assessed strictly by an AI bot and not by an individual. I don't think people are ready for that. In the future, I mean, God only knows what is going to happen. But in my world, I think the most that AI will impact is the things that help create efficiencies in what I would say is just an inefficient process. When you either post an ad and you get a bunch of applicants, you have to go through them to screen or vet them, which is tedious. I think AI would be great for that, to expedite the process. I think AI can help with tweaking job descriptions. I think that AI can, at some level, do accurate and valuable assessments with write-ups. But I do think that there's got to be a human component after that to really verify that, because, hiring is a very, very personal thing. And I don't think AI will ever be able to capture that.
No, you're absolutely right. I think we look at AI on different components of that entire, I call it employee journey. So the employee journey, as you mentioned, initially it's the entire recruiting, interviewing, and then getting somebody on board, and then going through the journey of timekeeping and HR, and then payroll. Where we see AI mainly in the middle office and back office, so which is timekeeping, payroll, analytics, trends that you as a human being will have a tough time kind of analyzing, scores of data out there. I think the industry is pretty mature today in terms of the sourcing and matching of like where the flavors we're seeing now are domain expertise within a specific vertical. So,
Yeah.
so if I am AI and I'm recruiting for healthcare and it's a cardiologist, then the AI is very geared towards that domain matching and so forth. So initially when we got into this 10 12 years ago in terms of looking at where these trends were going, the generic AI fails, frankly, because it's just kind of looking at it. And it's so where the world we see moving towards is, I believe organizations are going to become more leaner. You're going to be 10x more productive. And as you very well mentioned, areas where there's repetitive, high volume, less of a human touch involved to make that gut feeling type of decision, those are all going to be automated. I call it automated rather than AI. I think where the industry is at today, which is in April 2025, I say that because every month we see something new, is we are in this evolution of what I call AI automation. So it's not truly AI where it's autonomous and like your self-driving car. It is where I'm using AI, but it's really looking at my core automation and adding some intelligence into it, a flavor of that intelligence.
Right.
That's where today we see the biggest value you're getting from your organization. And as you hit the 20, $25 million mark in a traditional staffing agency, we see AI then coming in, helping recruiters right away. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But other roles within your organization, and frankly, even catching trends, and I wouldn't call the word fraud, but mainly looking at timekeeping data, for example. If you've got
Yes.
8 to 10,000 temporary contingent labor workforce working, what is there some sort of fraud happening there? Is there something outliers that I, as a business owner, as a CEO, as a leader, I need to understand what that is. And I think that's where the domain expertise comes in and the AI portion comes in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you hit on something. You hit on something very, very true. I mean, in our industry, and I doubt it's different from a lot, but when you get to that size, right, like our size, it's very daunting to try and get your mind around all of the data, and it's just over. It's very, very difficult. And so fraud, pre-audit kind of things,
Correct.
yeah, would be very, very valuable. So yeah, I agree.
And Brad, we come from like our company's born and bred California, right? So we know compliance. One thing we know is compliance. And when we are running our timekeeping, for example, and the billing components running MSP programs with thousands and thousands of employees and 40, 50 agencies through 5, 10 states, you can imagine the insanity that it takes to basically keep them all together. And
Yeah.
in that, AI has started to play a very big role operationally. But having said that, can you explain to us, which we kind of skipped over a little bit, is your transition into Jobvious and what it really does, the value proposition of Jobvious? If you could please talk about that a little bit, please.
Jobvious was born essentially out of my frustration with our industry and the challenges that I believe could easily be fixed, but for one reason or another are not. And I don't have the answer for that. And I have asked many of my peers, I've asked many of our MSP partners, and everyone felt the same way that, we don't know if this is sustainable. Right now, you have a lot of large programs where there is 50 million in spend or 100 million in spend, and you have, 50 to 75 vendors, right? As a vendor, you're responsible for covering all of those recs. But then, because of direct sourcing and because of the overpopulation of vendors, you end up with a sub to hire ratio of 6, 7%, which it's just not sustainable. And you would have conversations with clients about these things. And I had a whole matrix that I built out called the vendor perspective that factored in everything within a program and then would show you, on average, what your staffing partner is probably getting in gross profit. And almost all the time, it was break even or a little bit in the negative with gross profit versus expense. And all those things, tenure, and the number of vendors, number of canceled recs, that kind of stuff. And it was clear as day, but people just didn't want to take action. So I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way. This isn't sustainable, the traditional model. And I thought about Uber and what they did and what they overcame. And I thought there's got to be a way for us to socialize contingent labor, in a similar way that Uber did. So we built Jobvious to do just that. It's an incentive-based network referral platform that can be deployed by a company to their internal team, where they can build out networks of people that then they could refer to opportunities within their employer or any other Jobvious client. It's very, very passive. The network that you form, the people that you invite are yours and yours only. That is your business. Any requisition that comes into the platform that matches one of those individuals, you'll be notified and you can refer them. And you will make, if they get the job, the equivalent of 10% of that starting wage for every hour they work indefinitely. I think I used an example earlier. If a project manager role comes through and I have somebody in my network that matches, I could refer them. If that individual gets the job, I would start making $6, $6.50 an hour and earning about $240 to $260 a week indefinitely while that person is on the job, which is over $12,000 a year, right? In passive income for one referral. Now imagine if your network was 50, 60, 70 people and you had 3 people out working on referral, how much money you could make on top of your regular job. And it increases retention at the client sites. We bill out at a 32 to 36% markup, which is below industry standard because we don't have recruiting costs. It makes employees more engaged at the company that deploys the platform. It accesses passive talent. Right now, all of the vendors go to Zip and Indeed. We're all fishing from the same pond, which is very frustrating. There's only 2 viable options these days. And so there's nothing unique from one vendor to the next on the quality of candidate they're going to provide. Jobvious accesses the entire candidate base, not just the 15 or 16% that is on the job boards, but the other 84, 85% that is not on the job boards. So it's literally a win-win-win across the board for clients, for people in general, for individuals looking for jobs, for individuals that want to make passive income, that want to help their friends and earn passive income. So it's a great tool.
And this could be either 1099s or W-2s, right? It doesn't matter.
Yes. So of course, if a referral is made and the client hires them, right? Jobvious is the employer of record, and we W-2 that individual, but the person that referred that individual, what we call a network champion, they would be paid out as a 1099 contractor.
Got it. That's a pretty straightforward. Now, looking at you being an EOR in that sense, is it always an EOR? Sometimes you're doing direct sourcing, just taking a fee. Have you always been an EOR right from the start?
Yeah, we have some independent contractors, that work for us, but the vast majority of individuals that we have out there are W-2 employees. You mentioned direct sourcing, and I think that direct sourcing, there's a lot I could say about direct sourcing. I think that direct sourcing is a novel idea and concept, but what I can't wrap my brain around is that there are so many people out there that have tried it, used it in our industry that just say it doesn't work, but people are determined to try and make it work. And I think that, and we've been approached by, hey, could we use this and deploy it for our direct sourcing program? And there it might enhance that. It could enhance that. It just depends on how it is utilized. It depends on whether or not you're using curators that work for you, the client, or if you're using a third-party curator of talent. There's a lot of things. And we I'll give you an example. There's a client of ours, a very large RPO client, that has their MSP managing their direct sourcing. There's no money to be made in an MSP anymore. So they do all of the direct sourcing and payrolling, right? Because it's the only way to make money. All the requisitions go to the direct sourcing company, and then they get released to their vendor community. And to me, I find it kind of interesting that in the early days, you probably remember the big thing was VOP, vendor on premise, where we would have a vendor on premise, and light industrials kind of migrated back that way. But I'm like, this really isn't any different than vendor on premise when you have another party there doing the sourcing and getting all of the requisitions before the vendor community. And by the way, I bet the vendor community isn't really aware that that's taking place. We found out just by coincidence through a conversation. That's the challenge, is the lack of transparency in these things, because they're fearful that if they're transparent and tell vendors won't want to support them. And I'm empathetic to that, but to me, there's right things and wrong things. And that just is wrong. I mean, because all staffing vendors are investing money in hope of getting something in return.
Yep.
No guarantees. And so we've already invested resources, time, money, and we have an expectation based on what the volume is and based on what the vendor count is and based on all these factors of what we might be able to capture. And we make an investment according to that. Oh, and then we find out a year and a half later that this is going on, right? And then it's very, very challenging and frustrating.
And it goes back to, transparency for that matter, right? It goes back to the transparency. What I recall when starting in 95, as light industrial, all you had to do was give a bill rate. If you want an unloader, it is $25 an hour. They did not care what you were paying. Not a question. Then it evolved to what's the markup. Then it evolved to what's the markup for regular, what's the markup for the overtime. They got you down on it. Then the next phase came in. Now your saturation time, I'm going to bring it down to 1 month. Then I'm going to take terms. What it is as an industry, everybody has been giving up those margins, and you saw it erode rapidly within a 5 to 10 year span.
Oh God, yeah. And you bring up a very, very, very good point. And the one thing that I'll throw in there, along with all of this stuff, right, that's happening, and you're going to have to pay 2.5% of your sales to the MSP and the VMS.
Yep.
And we're going to give them every rec first before they're distributed to you. And that it's just, I understand why those things were done, but when you collectively put them all together and look at it, you're like, this is not sustainable. This can't work.
It can't, and it's at the backs of the agencies, right? It's at the back of the supplier. It breaks their back at the end of the day.
And that's the problem I have. What bothers me the most is I think it's changing, but for the longest time, a company didn't really respect the supplier or value the supplier. It was just someone that was out there doing work like pushing buttons. And if they aren't happy, we'll just replace them. And, we've seen that. And I'm sure you guys have seen that. And they don't know, they're starting to, the value of a seasoned supplier in your supply chain. What intellectual capital is going to go out the door with them if you make a change? So maybe you should value them. Why don't you consult with the suppliers? Ask how many clients come to you and say, we want to have there's vendor forums, right? And then there's real vendor forums. Vendor forum with large companies where they sit up there and talk about things that are happening in initiatives. And then there's vendor forums where we want to know where you're struggling. We want to know the challenges because we're in this together. And if you guys succeed, we will succeed. Simple concept, but nobody does it.
It is difficult. And I'll give you a simple example. During COVID, we had a very large MSP using our timekeeping because it's unique to be able to handle 30, 40 agencies into a program and then keep them still separate with one clock on the wall, right? And they were not, because they didn't have the margins to go into a VMS. We technically ended up building a job ordering system for them. So call it a light VMS to save cost, get the efficiencies in place, still keep compliance, right? It totally changed the way things were done solely because unless you don't come from staffing, you cannot build a solution because you don't know the pain.
That's exactly right.
No analyst, no one's going to understand it. What you and I and TJ here, we've been in the field. We've been we've ourselves filled orders because we come from staffing and we started in tech back in 2000 in this industry. So the key there is that what you're saying is I myself witnessed a client who had an MSP with the VMS complaining about what are you going to do differently? What are you going to do differently? What happens is if you've been to ProcureCon, any buyer that is buying, I'm going to buy $100 million, $50 million worth of contingent labor is going to get their rears kissed by 2,000 people at that show, right?
Probably more. Yeah.
More.
Right.
There's a horde that's following them.
That's right.
What
Yeah.
the agencies don't understand is let's have some pride in figuring out, are those margins going to be worth the pain? Is everybody going to be evaluated fairly as what is right for that company? And if the company doesn't change their behavior, so another situation was the company kept telling the MSP and the providers, we need a new solution to do this. We've got these problems, but they're unwilling to change the behavior of their own supervisors and their own procurement team who was bent upon throwing orders in, not following up, not paying on time, and expecting a lot of other things in return because they want this benefit, they want that benefit, but yet there's not. So it's a two-way street in this industry.
Yep.
And I'm glad you brought it up because unless everybody doesn't speak up on it, somebody who's a procurement manager is not God at the end of the day. They're also human who have goals to meet. And the goal of really every supplier is to help them meet their needs because it's symbiotic relationship. It's not a one-way street.
Yeah, I think that those things, what I said in the beginning is these are challenges that could be fixed if people wanted to fix them. And one example is speaking to a prospective client that had, 800 million in contingent labor spend. And they were talking about, I've got procurement on this end. They care about cost. The end user over here, all they care about is quality and speed. It's like, how do I, bridge the gap? They had 200 suppliers. Okay. 200. And I told them, I said, this is a very simple fix. Okay. Cut your supplier list in half. Go to the ones that are staying, ask them for a 3% rate cut. They will gladly give it to you. And they will be more committed to serving your needs. Because right now, they probably aren't committed because there isn't enough revenue capture to afford them the opportunity to reinvest and become better. And the response was, well, hold on, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I was like, he's like, you always have to have a pipeline of vendors because they all become complacent sooner or later. I said, that is absolutely not true. Vendors only become complacent when they are experiencing diminishing returns year over year, month over month for the same work they're doing. That's why they become complacent. Not because they don't want to make money. They're complacent because they aren't making money.
Yep.
That's a very abridged version, right? But I don't understand why something like that. And I realize I'm an entrepreneur. And so I've gone to school, clients to say, I got to back it up a bit because I oversimplify things. If I need something done and want something, as entrepreneurs, you just charge forward, right? I don't know what it's like to exist in a large corporate environment. Clearly, I'm missing something. So help me understand, what are the challenges, obstacles, that you guys fight through to get something done? And I got a lot of great information because what seems very simple is a, 26-mile marathon for somebody at American Airlines, or wherever, right? These large institutional like behemoths. And I think more times than not, people throw up their hands. And, I heard one of our clients told us when I was asking about this, they said, a lot of times they become oversaturated, the vendors do, because it's a lot easier to add a vendor than to get rid of one, because fear of liability, fear of upsetting a manager that might have a close tie, fear of whatever. And it's provided enormous perspective for me. And that's really when I was looking at all this, when I realized I don't see change coming here. That's why I needed to go and build Jobvious, because I don't see any indication that, people are trying to become partners with individuals, vendors that largely, or that most likely represent their largest spend category year after year in a lot of organizations. The biggest line item.
That is so true. And that's why I think what's going to happen, Brad, is, as TJ mentioned, a lot of AI is going to take over certain things. So our concept has always been give the operational efficiency, let your recruiters talk to people, talk to your clients, talk to the talent, talk to them instead. And that's where you get loyalty. And something like JobEvo actually accelerates that. It's the same concept, but accelerates it, right? That's what that is doing. It's monetizing it, actually making it real versus the network I've got. If right now somebody call me, we can always find somebody we know because we deal with hundreds of staffing agencies, right, as our customers. And we are able to make a call. Hey, guys, is there anybody in Texas that can help out this company? Could you do this or could you do that? But imagine being able to monetize it along with it, right?
Right.
That's the key.
Yeah, exactly. What drove me in this direction was I did a lot of research before we started building out on internal referral platforms. Everybody has a internal referral platform for direct hires with some sort of nominal reward. And after studying it for 6 months, it was evident, and we engaged clients to participate as well. It was evident and very clear that individuals really weren't motivated by that $1,500. They weren't motivated where they were going to proactively go, oh, there's a job for X, Y, and Z. Half the time in communications, an issue too. Do you think your employees are going on your website and looking at, openings and then, going out to their friends to try and proactively recruit somebody? No, it's luck. And that's all it boils down to. So we knew that we had to generate and create, a system, a platform that was very, very passive, that, got you to populate your network that was yours. Nobody else could tap into it but you. And it is something that one individual said, this is like kind of an annuity. I could leave this to my kids. If, let's say, my network was producing 75 grand a year. I said, yeah, you could. I had other people ask, is there a market on Jobvious to sell your network? If I have 2 years of history, where my network is generating 50 grand, I'm like, that's a great idea. We haven't crossed that bridge. Maybe, I don't know. I kind of shy away from it because it kind of takes away the personal aspect. And, we also just recently integrated with another company called Vericlick. We do AI assessments through Jobvious based on what the client request is and ID verification. So there's none of those fake test takers, and you end up with somebody showing up that scored wonderful on a Python, test, but has no clue. I think we've all experienced that, unfortunately. It's still shy. I'm like, don't you think they're going to realize that you aren't capable the first day you show up? I mean, what do you think's going to happen? Right?
IT is a very challenging field. And
You know what I
yeah.
what I really like about this concept, Brad, is that if Brad, you've invited me to your network, I can only be in one network. Usually that's where the battle is, right? I, as TJ, would want to be in multiple. I want to be in Sandy's network, right, Brad? And that's step one to me because it's my relationship. You trust me. Once you're with me, that's it. Second part I really like about this is the fact that if Brad is referring TJ, there is already a relationship and the likelihood of that success is very high versus somebody off the street applying for a job.
Precisely, because you know the individual.
Yes.
You advocate for him. And, the reason that only one person can be in one network is because it's the only way really conceivably that it would work. But at first I did it because I wanted individuals to own something because, throughout my entire career, and the reason I probably embrace autonomy and all of these things is because I want everyone, the lives that I touch, to experience the great things that I've experienced as an entrepreneur, the freedoms that I've been given, the ability to make decisions on a fly and, have a colossal failure, but learn, or a colossal success and celebrate. And this is part of that journey for me, is creating an environment where, everybody can have something that's theirs and be proud of it and have it pay them and be rewarded for doing good things and representing the people that care about. Maybe you don't care much about them, but you value them. And that's part of the whole concept. And I believe in it very much, probably too much, because I'm very, very passionate about it because I think that it works, and this wouldn't work at a client, but I don't know, for some reason, it just feels like the right thing to do.
Things always built on hunch, right? So, Brad, today with today's economic climate, have you already seen any type of softening on your side, and where do you see this going in the next 6 months? What are you looking at 2025? Any contingent plans? What's going on?
Yeah, we've seen softening. Rec volume is down, but we've all been through these challenges, and my perspective really is I'm not going to hypothesize on what catastrophe could happen in 2 months that's going to negatively impact my financials. Just keep my eye on the prize, doing the best that we can. That's all you can do. And eventually things will tick up. Of course, tariffs, the fear of tariffs is really holding down the economy, I think, a little bit. We saw the market rally when we heard that there was a 90-day pause. So I think there's a lot of and whenever there's uncertainty, there's going to be hesitation. And what I have seen, and I'm sure you guys have too, is how much of a global market contingent labor has become. I have had more clients in the last 6 months request if we could help them in Europe or in Latin America or in India than I had in the previous 15 years. And so if individuals watching this podcast aren't aware, you need to have thoughts on becoming a global provider if you are doing contingent labor. And one of the eye-opening events was we were talking to a company, Visa, about Jobvious, and they were very ecstatic about it. They asked, have you guys rolled this out internationally? And we said, not yet. And she's like, oh, that's a shame. We have 10,000 contractors on billing. I was like, well, that's great. She goes, but only 290 of them are in the United States.
Mhm.
The rest are throughout the globe. And that was eye-opening and scary, and a compelling argument to rapidly deploy resources to open up other offices.
How would you go about, Brad, on as an EOR? Do you do EOR outside the US at this point, or you don't?
We do we're established in a variety of places, the ones I named earlier, in India and in various other places of Asia and in Central America and Mexico, Canada. But we find ways to manage. We had this request from one of our clients, I don't know who, to employ somebody in Australia. And somehow we managed to pull it off. And so, yeah, we do. And if we do not have a business entity in a country, we can get one up and running typically in a matter of 3 to 4 months.
So the way you function it is you set up your own entity in that country, then those employees become the employees of that entity, and that's how you're doing it. And are these entities typically, Brad, owned by you, or are they typically outsourced? I mean, it's completely up to you to, share that, but
No, they're owned by me. And there's something that is missed in translation, in my experience, when you have a third-party outsourcing provider. There is, and I equate it to a feeling of not belonging to the company I'm serving, that connection. And that lacking, I just think it has to be there. I believe in, we all have to be on the same page, that we all have to be on the same team and unified. And you can't do that with a third-party outsourcing provider.
totally agree. On my side, the last question would be, how do you see the transformation of this industry moving forward in regards to tech and space?
As far as what do I see the industry evolving into, frankly, I think there's going to be a lot of contingent labor that is moving to other places than the United States. I think that the traditional contingent labor provider is going to struggle if they don't find alternate revenue streams. There are clients that only use, SOW or 1099 individuals. You have to have that capability. You have to understand how to be compliant. I think that you're going to see an increase of initiatives with direct sourcing, but I do believe that is going to ramp up, and then I think it's going to probably disappear. I think it's a old concept that they repackaged, and now it looks like a shiny new gift, and people are buying it. And I just think it's nothing new. It's not innovative, and I don't think it yields the results that people are looking for. I would like to say that organizations, I speak my mind because hopefully somebody will hear it and understand that, your contingent labor providers are not machines. We have a strong desire to succeed in partnership with our clients, to make you look good, to make you succeed. But we need to work together. And that seems to be, lacking significantly. I would like to see, and I think one day that will start becoming present again, where there is, more relationship building. I think that will help to be facilitated by the demise of the MSP. I don't see the MSPs existing much longer. If you talk to clients, you'll know that there is such diminished value that they add from 5 or 6 years ago. And, talking to the SIA, evidently from their data, there is a trend where more and more organizations are starting to bring it in-house, which I think is the right thing to do because you get better buy-in and you get greater stakeholder adoption. And I don't understand I mean, I get it because people want someone to point the finger at, but other than that, they supposedly bring expertise, but I will go do that for free for you if you really need it. I can set up a program very easily. I'm sure all of you can. So I think that that's probably something that we're going to be seeing in a couple, currently and into the next few years. But then there's a portion that's kind of unknown, there's a continued consolidation in our business, in our industry. We're one of the remaining industries that's still fragmented there's thousands of $5, 10, $20 million staffing companies throughout the United States, that these private equity companies are hitting up on a daily basis, trying to buy and do a massive roll up, right? And kudos to them. I would do it if I had that kind of money, or I would try to. But so yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that are on the horizon. AI, I think, is going to have the impact that all of us already talked about. But recruiters, fear not. I don't see it replacing you. They said that the internet was going to replace recruiters, and that didn't happen. So I don't think this will either. But I think that the outlook still looks, I think it looks very bright. It's still the only job where you can have a lifelong impact on the product that you are delivering, and that's pretty mind blowing. If you think about the early days, and I think about it, the friends that I put in jobs 25 years ago, and look back like they wouldn't be there as a SVP at PNC Bank if I didn't get them into the industry, right? My brother would never have entered technology if I didn't put him into, Borden Foods 100 years ago as a help desk tech. And then he ended up being like disaster recovery and all this other stuff for JP Morgan Chase. I did that, right? I mean, they did. But, where else can you make that kind of impact? I think it'd be hard pressed to find.
That is so true. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got to cover today, Brad. But it's really been awesome talking to you. Thank you for sharing, actually, very candidly, very frankly, everything, because that's the only way to, to make an impact, so to speak. How does somebody find you?
I can be emailed at brad@itsjobvious.com.
Got it. That's the best place to do it. So excellent, Brad. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank
It's great
you.
talking to you.